Welcome back to another podcast episode where we help aspiring developers get jobs and junior developers grow. In this episode, we are going to be reviewing Lighthouse Labs. And so I invited 4 alumni on, and I know I usually do 3. This time we're going to do 4. I'm kind of just curious if it'll change things up. But let's go ahead and dive into the intros before we hear about their experiences. So, Josh, if you would, what previous industry did you come from? When did you graduate? Oh, we'll do it one at a time. That's
okay. Well, I started in power engineering originally. So I was 19 when I went to school for that. But I was also diagnosed with epilepsy at the time, and things were good. I was working in the industry for a year, but kind of took a toll, working 12-hour shifts with the commute and whatnot. And my seizures got really bad. So I ended up having to take medical leave, and there's some processes going on. And then eventually, when the pandemic hit, I thought, why not make the switch? Because I've always really been into computers. I mean, started with games, and then it's like, oh, there's more interesting stuff on this.
Interesting. Okay. So what, okay. Yeah, I definitely want to know if you've gotten a position, but before that, when did you graduate?
I graduated of November last year, November 2020.
Okay. And are you still looking for a position now?
Well, actually, I am looking for my second position. I had a contract up in Calgary, Alberta. It was 4 months. It was with Safety in Schools for rebuilding their teacher interface for occupational health and safety courses. So the website looked like it was from 2004. It did not look very good. You had to click on 7 buttons to do one thing, and it just, yeah, but it was fun. Great experience. I'm just back on the job hunt for another one.
Okay, that sounds good. I'm sure they appreciate the revamp. Lee, how about you?
Okay, so before this, I was a pharmacy technician in an oncology clinic at a hospital. And that's it. I just wasn't happy with the work. It wasn't my colleagues, they were great and everything, but I was looking for something new. And it was also a new hobby. So I stumbled upon coding. And before the pandemic in Montreal, they would have these little meetups where they could show you how to make, a little chat app within a couple of hours. But it was a lot of cut and pasting, but I found it really interesting. So I decided to continue on.
Okay. Yeah. Really cool. Maybe I just spaced it. Did you mention when you graduated?
Oh, I'm sorry. No, I graduated about a year ago.
Okay, a year ago.
Yeah.
And did you found the position afterwards?
No, I started working about a week ago.
About a week? So you...
Yeah.
Well, congratulations.
Yeah, thanks. No, it was big because it was a tough journey. But I just want to explain a little bit before, because before I hit the boot camp, it's like I said, I was looking for a new hobby. So I've never written any code in my life. And so I started with HTML, CSS, and I fell in love with it. And I hit JavaScript, and I was like, this is really weird. I need some help with this. And, so I was looking for places to learn, and I discovered boot camps and how short they were. So I said that might be a good option, and, discussed it because it was a big career change. It was a big change in my life. I'd have to drop my work, which I decided to do it. And so that's it. When I got out of it, I still didn't fully understand everything. So I don't know if I was quite job ready, but I just continued learning on my own, and that's it, progressed, and was able to land a job about a week ago.
You were. That's awesome. Thanks for sharing. And if you would, can you go into your Zoom settings and just turn your mic volume up just a little bit?
Oh, sure.
It's barely low, but yeah. Daniel, how about you?
So before the pandemic, I was working in China for a fintech company, well, more for a finance company. But at the time, we were looking to branch out into fintech. So I was starting to research different tech companies, have meetings with different software developers. And I started to realize that we couldn't really communicate because I had no idea what they were talking about. So even though they would try to dumb it down, it was still hard to visualize. So on my own, I just started to learn a little bit about programming just to ease the transition and talking to them. Then afterwards, I started to realize I quite liked it. And then during the pandemic, I was in North America on vacation. I couldn't go back. Then I realized, it might be a good idea for a career change. And I liked tech, and I think fintech is the future no matter what. So that's what I wanted to go into. And so that's why I enrolled in Lighthouse. 12-week boot camp would be what I need to get my foot in the door. And then I graduated in December 2020. And then after which I found a job pretty quickly working for an American fintech company that automates 401ks. So it's all in all, it's worked out pretty well for me. So
really cool. I'm really glad to hear that. Caitlin, how about you?
So I come from the retail industry. I worked in retail for about 6 years. Lots of customer service experience. Coding is something I've always been really, really passionate about. I love problem solving and algorithms and all that good stuff. So I decided, especially with the pandemic, I feel like that's a common theme between all of us. The pandemic kind of drove us all to hop right into boot camp. So I did that very recently. I graduated in April, at the end of April. I took a week off after that just to kind of reset from the stressful atmosphere of the boot camp. So I've been looking for a job for about 3 weeks now. I haven't found a position yet, but I do have some good leads on positions.
That's awesome. Okay. So yeah, you've only been in the job process 3 weeks. I know it might seem like a long time, but
feels like a long time in comparison to boot camp time, but
I can see that. All right. Really cool. So sounds like most of you got that fire under your butt when the pandemic hit, which is really interesting. And sometimes, situations like that can expose what you've always kind of wanted to do, even if it's just like a career transition to better yourself. Sometimes you need a situation like that to help you to highlight that. So that's awesome. So why'd you choose Lighthouse Labs over other coding boot camps?
Well, me personally, I chose Lighthouse because it's kind of one of the bigger ones, not, I think, the only one in Canada. I'm pretty sure there might be a couple other smaller ones. I looked into it a little bit, but I really wanted to do it in person. Unfortunately, that didn't happen. But when I was looking into it, I was planning on going to SAIT in Calgary and do my 2-year diploma for software development. And I'd already been to school, and I decided that, maybe boot camp is kind of a way to get my foot in the door and get some actual experience and kind of kickstart my career. And I watched lots of reviews on Lighthouse. I tried to compare between traditional education, boot camps, self-taught. Just kind of weigh all the options and see what was best. And I chose boot camp, and Lighthouse to me just seemed like the best one.
Okay. Anything?
Yeah. For me, the reason I chose Lighthouse was originally I was debating between Lighthouse because, Josh just mentioned, it's one of the bigger ones in Canada. But I was debating between that one and General Assembly, which is a little bit more of an international one. However, I saw that Lighthouse, the price was a little bit better. And also, it turns out one of my friend's brothers-in-law used to be a mentor at Lighthouse in 2014. So I got an opportunity to talk to him, and he told me what it would be like. And he painted a pretty good picture. So I felt pretty comfortable choosing Lighthouse.
Okay.
Yeah, I think my experience is really similar. There's a couple really big ones in Montreal. There's Lewagan, and then there's also Concordia's boot camp as well. So I kind of took some time. I actually applied to another boot camp as well, which I was accepted to Lighthouse and that other boot camp. And I just took some time and kind of compared their career services. And that was a really big draw for me. It seemed like Lighthouse has a really established space in the employer atmosphere. So that was a really big draw to me to be able to have that support afterwards, after boot camp was finished.
All right. That makes sense.
Yeah, for myself, it's about the same because in Montreal as well, it was pretty much Lewagan and Concordia and Lighthouse. And at the time, it was before pre-confinement, so I was able to visit the places. So I went to visit Lighthouse in their facilities that they had, and it was very nice, modern, and they let me sit in on their midterm exams or presentations. And it was really fun. It was a nice environment, and you saw that everybody was learning in a very, I guess, healthy and a good-natured manner. but so they're having fun doing it at the same time, which was very important to me. And when I visited Concordia, they didn't really let me in to see what was going on in the classes, which I understand it's their students' time, but I just got a better feel from Lighthouse and the Wagon. I think it's a bit shorter of a course, and I thought 12 weeks was short enough as it was, so I chose Lighthouse.
Okay. Did you guys hear about Braintree?
No.
No.
I read about them, like that Bootcamp review website. I forget the specific name for it, but it was comparing Lighthouse to a bunch of different ones, and Braintree, I think, was one of them.
Okay. I was just curious because I did a review on them and I thought they were in Canada, but I could be wrong. So, okay, interesting. So let's dive into the program. What do you think of it?
I really enjoyed it, honestly. Before I decided to really dive into coding and make the career change, I went and shadowed my uncle, he's been a software developer for 16 or 17 years now, I think, and he manages a DevOps team in Calgary. So I got to go see kind of the environment of how an office in a bigger corporation works, and that kind of piqued my interest because I was walking around. I got to see the coder, I got to see the project manager, I got to see the business analyst, kind of see the ecosystem. And when I saw the coder, he was explaining some just basic JavaScript. At the time, I knew nothing about JavaScript, so it looked like a big jumbled mess. I was like, that looks really cool. And he tried to explain it to me, didn't really understand it. And then I spent, like Lee was saying, I spent some time with HTML and CSS and just, building static websites with nothing but those two. And I was like, oh, this is so cool. I can create anything I want. And then that's when I knew Lighthouse came in. And when I was looking through their course programs, or like their course criteria or whatever, I really like the fact that they do lots of big projects along the way. So they're not just giving you stuff and saying, do this and do this and do this. They're guiding you along, not quite handheld, but guiding you along to building something productive that actually works, something you can put on the website that's full stack, right?
Yeah, makes sense.
Yeah, for me, I liked the experience, and in hindsight, the experience I realized was better than I thought even. I like Josh mentioned, I like the projects. I think that's the best way to learn is by doing. And I also liked, Lighthouse has pretty solid mentor support. So in the first 4 weeks, they have apprentice mentors, which are basically people who just graduated the program. So they'll help you learn simple things like different data structures, like objects, arrays, and whatnot. And the first 4 weeks, they're usually able to handle it. Sometimes they'll reference the work they did and be like, this is what I did, which is not always super helpful, but I think you can at least see what your growth will be like, which I think is a pretty motivating factor. And then also, as time went on, I thought the course curriculum was pretty good. It was pretty standard. It was like JavaScript and then Ruby, and then it's pretty much JavaScript, then Ruby and React. So it was pretty standard. I didn't think that was anything special, but sometimes I remember when I was doing the program, I'd get a ticket, and because you follow along the website, it has all these tickets, like normal project management tools, and it would be kind of not very clearly defined. It'd be like, what do I have to do? So things like that would sort of teach you how to ask the right question, as opposed to just being like, what do I do? And then as I started to work and I started to get tickets, and sometimes the tickets weren't clearly defined, I realized, I was trained for this. I didn't realize that. So it's pretty nice.
So I'm curious, do you feel like Ruby is a very common backend language in Canada?
I wrote an article on Medium called Israel's dead. But it was just Lighthouse asked you to write that. They asked you to write an article. And
that was one of our assignments.
Yeah. I wrote on Ruby too, actually. Whether it's still relevant or not.
So I'm sure you guys saw that there's job postings for the job market is still there. Yeah. But I was thinking, because I work in Python now, and I was like, and it's kind of similar to Ruby. There are quite a few similarities, and I was like, I it's common in Canada, but I probably would have preferred them to teach us Python, and Python and Django, which is like ORMs change everything. So stuff like that I would like.
Yeah, I definitely agree with Daniel. I do wish they taught us Python, but at the same time, like my experience at my first job, we inherited a lot of legacy code. The database, it was built of basically 3 different databases that all did the exact same thing that were intertwined together. It was a complete mess. One of them was Ruby, and it was just complete mess, but we ended up taking it and changing it. So I think learning Ruby was helpful. I wish I did learn Python, but learning Ruby was helpful so that I can take that and then I can learn Python on my own, because Ruby and Python are so similar. It makes it a lot easier, right? And then if you're going to be taking all this legacy code that was built back when Ruby was so popular, and then moving it into Python, it's, it made more sense to me.
Look,
but
so 100% agree on the skills transferring over. Why did they teach Ruby? Did they ever explain that?
Well, can I add something in here?
Yeah, go for
it's
it.
just, and it is related to why they're teaching Ruby. And at one point I was like, why are they teaching jQuery? Because who uses that? But the thing is, you know what? In my job now, it's a bit old code, and they're using jQuery. So
I only use jQuery. Like for front end, we don't have a framework. Like we don't really have a framework. Like it's only jQuery or like vanilla JavaScript.
As Ross was bringing it up, I kind of was recalling them explaining why they were teaching Ruby to us, and it was essentially just because it's legacy code. And a lot of the time you'll get legacy code that you'll have to know how to read, and Ruby is very, very popular. It grew really quickly. I think it's diminishing a little bit now, and Python's kind of up and coming a little bit, but Ruby definitely was a big popular language for a long time. So it is important to kind of understand the inner workings of it to be able to transfer it to whatever new language you're using.
Yeah. And especially with Ruby on Rails, because there's so much magic, as they say, that goes on behind the scenes. If you were to learn Python and then try and understand Ruby, it's like, okay, I type in this one command and 10 things happen. How do I translate this? What am I supposed to write in Python? And, so I mean, specifically Ruby on Rails, I guess. But yeah, that was my take on it.
I think the other part of Ruby that was really interesting, especially in this program, is they handheld us a lot through Java and HTML and CSS. But when we hit the Ruby week, they were like, you're on your own. Teach yourself Ruby, essentially. Here's a project. Here's all the tools. It's a fully functional website already. There's just some features that you have to implement, but you essentially have to learn Ruby to do that. And I think it was to kind of prepare us for the working world in having to learn a new language in a very short period of time and then make it functional as well. So I think that was a big motivation for them to be able to teach us Ruby.
Yeah, I agree with Caitlin. Working, when you go to an existing app, when you're working there, a lot of the things, when it's in a language you don't know, you learn the language by seeing what other people wrote beforehand. Mm-hmm. So the Jungle project they did was a pretty good example of how to do that. And I think, like everyone mentioned, Rails is a lot of legacy code. So I imagine that's why almost every bootcamp I've seen teaches it.
So,
and I know, I just want to add in that Lighthouse's philosophy also is not to say that this is all you're going to need to know out in the world, but it's more to say, we're going to show you how you can teach yourself these languages. And then when you need other language to learn other languages, you'll have the tools to be able to teach yourself those.
Yeah.
That makes complete sense. I get that. And it sounds like, they kind of just used Ruby for the back end. It sounds like they didn't teach Node.js. It was just JavaScript on the front end.
We did a lot of Node.js.
Yeah.
Oh.
We did do some Node.js.
There was a bit, yeah.
It wasn't like we had a week dedicated to it, because most of the projects, we had a React week. We did some of our lots of our stuff in jQuery, and then we had the Ruby week, and then we had our midterm, our finals. But it's not like there was a dedicated Node.js week, but pretty much everything that we were going along the way had Node.js involved with it. So there were there were some things that were just dedicated per week, but then there were also some topics that kind of spanned over the whole 12 weeks. So it's like, you're not just dealing with Node.js for 1 week and then you go and learn something else. It was, you dealt with it throughout the entire boot camp almost. Like, I mean, maybe not for the first couple of weeks, but
Okay, that makes sense. Yeah, my initial concern was only 12 weeks learning Node.js and Ruby seems like it might stretch you a little bit thin, but it sounds like they didn't put too much emphasis on that. So that's pretty good to hear.
It was very like background. Like you would just be NPM installing a bunch of things. And like through that process, like for 12 weeks, you would then figure out, like they don't explicitly maybe explain it super like a very detailed unless you ask for it. But it's sort of like you start to put the pieces together. And I think that's what most of these boot camps, I assume, try to teach you, because that's what programming is, right?
Okay.
Yeah, I think it's kind of one of those things, especially with boot camp. It's like what you get, what you want out of it almost. So if you notice that you're doing npm install all the time, what does that mean to you? And like, what are you asking the right questions to figure out what you're actually going through and what the processes are behind that, rather than just following instructions. So I think that the best way to get the most out of these kind of things is to like ask the mentor, like, what am I doing? Or what's going on here? Can you explain this process to me? And fully understanding every step you're going through versus just following instructions blindly kind of thing.
Okay. I think that makes a lot of sense.
And,
so real quick.
Sorry.
Yeah, go ahead real quick and then we got to move on.
Okay, I was just going to add on to something that Lee said when he was saying or mentioning about them not necessarily teaching you everything you need to know and becoming a junior developer right away, but giving you the skills to kind of learn what you need to do and learn how to teach yourself new languages. Is my first job, the stack was already picked when I got hired, and I had to teach myself Vue. Vue 3 immediately right after boot camp, and it was like that because I'd already done jQuery to React to Ruby, and Vue is such a similar, well, it's not quite similar, but it's a really good framework. It actually became my favorite framework after I started working there. But that's one thing I wanted to add on, is that they do teach you how to teach yourself, basically.
Oh no, you just stirred up all of the React fans. Shouldn't have said
Don't
that.
get me wrong, I love React. I'm actually building my portfolio in React right now, but Vue is still, I like it too, because everything's on one page. I don't have to go back and forth between tabs.
React's actually my least favorite week of boot camp. I'm not gonna lie, it was the hardest week by far. I was so stressed the entire time. But I love it now.
Yeah. Well, I mean, that's how like CSS is, right? Like people hate it so much until they get comfortable with it. That's how JavaScript is. People hate it so much until they get comfortable with it. That's how React is. That's how a lot of different things are. So I want to get a bit better feel for like the size of your classes and kind of just like how much support you had. So how big were your cohorts?
Well, mine was about, I think we had 30 students in my cohort, and it was Western. So there was people from, I think there was maybe 4 people from Alberta, like a couple in Calgary, one in Edmonton, then there was me in Red Deer, and then the rest were from BC, like more Western, West Coast kind of thing. And in terms of support, they actually did pretty well, in my opinion, because for the most part, you're working with your other classmates, right? They set up Discord rooms and you're all at your table. So there'd be about 4 of you, maybe 5 of you sitting inside of a Discord chat, and you're all working along the daily projects and the daily tasks together for a week. And then they'd switch you into a new table the next week. So you kind of get to work with different people, and it's teaching you how to collaborate as well as doing all that. And then in terms of the mentors, sometimes it was a little bit kind of like, I wish there was more of them, but then other times they were right there. They were very helpful. They were very handy. It just really depended on the mentor you got at the time.
Okay.
I think mine was also, I was on the East Coast, so mine was about between maybe 25 and 30. It's hard to tell when you're online, actually. Yeah. But yeah, it was most of them were for the general like Toronto area, like mostly from Ontario, and there were maybe like 5 to 10 from Quebec. But in general, I found the support was I found it was pretty indicative of what life would be like after boot camp, where you go to your senior developer, and like not all senior developers are born equal. So you're going to get someone who you sometimes will get a mentor who's like gives you the answer, like just like doesn't explain what the answer is, and just, like want to get it out. Other
I hated that.
People will like go into really like excruciating detail. I shouldn't say excruciating, but like in a positive way, like very, very detailed, and who are very friendly. And obviously when you're paying for a service, you expect for it to be top notch all the time. But then like as time goes on, people, you remember the good ones and not really the bad ones. And I thought in the end, it was kind of like what working developer life was like. You're going to get you're going to have, as a junior developer, you're going to go to your senior developer, and hopefully they'll be able to help. But sometimes they just kind of tell you, like, you got to figure it out, man.
Yeah. I think you had a good feel on that one, comparing it. So, yeah, go ahead.
Oh yeah, my cohort, I think we started with about 40 at the beginning, but we ended with about 25, I would say.
Wow.
And I think that's a mix of like personal reasons. I mean, Lighthouse does offer like a rollover option. So if you feel like the bootcamp's a little too heavy for you, you can always roll over into the next cohort. So that's really nice as well. In terms of support, I 100% agree with Daniel. There were some times I was like, this is the best mentor I've ever had. Other times I was like, I left calls being like, I still don't understand what the heck is happening here. So I definitely left bootcamp with some favorite mentors, some less favorite mentors as well. But Lighthouse does offer this rating system where you can actually review your mentor afterwards as well. So I think they do take into consideration, like, are the mentors being really helpful? And they are trying to regulate that service. Like Daniel said, like, we are paying for it, so we do expect it to be a good service, obviously. So I think they're trying to regulate it through that kind of system that we have.
Okay.
And in my cohort, it was pre-quarantine, so we actually went in and there was 8 people in my cohort. And the ratio for mentors, there was around 2 or 3 mentors, but there was 3 cohorts at the same time in the same building. So I guess the amount of people, ours was 8. I think the one before was 6 and the one after was 4. So there's around 18 people there, 2 mentors, roughly about that. And when we switched to remote, I didn't really notice any difference in wait time for mentors. But the quality of mentors, I have to say, I guess I got lucky. I found they were very good, very helpful, and one in particular was, I have to give him a shout out. It was this guy David. He stuck with me. It was when we're in remote, we're in React week, and I had such a blocker on a problem, and usually the mentors cut out at 9 o'clock. They're finished. He stayed with me to around 10:30 at night, trying to figure out a problem. And he wouldn't want to, like, I had to tell him to say, okay, I'm done. We got to pick this up tomorrow. So, I mean, from my experience, the mentors were outstanding.
Okay. Shout out to David.
Yeah.
That's awesome. So just so I have a clear idea, maybe one of you mentioned it. Was it kind of just self-paced and taught by the mentors, or did you have an actual instructor that taught it?
Yeah, so we had instructor lessons from 10 to 12 every single day, and then there were activities to do.
Mm-hmm. Okay, perfect.
Basically, the instructors would just like introduce the topic and talk about it like generally for 2 hours, and then what the activities that they would just pretty much reinforce what we learned. I found like the activities were far more helpful than the lectures, just because I find lectures are not the best way to learn in general.
And for me personally too, when I was, I'm not going to lie, I'm a bit of a night owl, and I tend to wake up later than most people. And I was late on a couple of lectures, and even then it was nice that they recorded them too, because then it gives you the option, like, it's like, oh no, I messed up today. Okay, I'm going to watch the lecture instead and just replay it, understand it, and then I'm going to work extra late tonight. But other than that, the lectures were for me, in my side, were pretty hands-on. All of my lectures were really great, especially when we were doing some of the back-end stuff. One of my favorite lecturers, his name was Andy, and he was awesome. He was always trying to engage everybody, even though there were so many people. He was always trying to get people more involved in the process and getting them asked questions and that kind of stuff, because it's so easy online to just stay quiet, not ask questions. And if you're confused about something, you just kind of sit in the background and don't say anything, right? Instead of when you're in person, you can just call them over and be like, oh, I didn't quite understand that, right? So I think they did pretty decent on that end for me anyways.
Yeah, okay. I would agree. I think it's funny that you brought up Andy, because they record all of the lectures and you're able to access your lecture, but then also past cohorts lectures as well through the website that they use. And so sometimes if I felt like I wasn't fully understanding the concept that we had just learned, I would actually watch Andy's lecture. And I found him so just captivating as a lecturer. So he did a great job doing that. And his lectures were really enjoyable to attend.
Yeah, no, Andy was my favorite. We always made jokes because I guess back before the lockdown, he would consistently go to McDonald's all the time. So that was like a running joke between the instructors from the west side, anyways, in Vancouver. But yeah, no, they were great. Hafiz was another one that was also pretty good, but he was only with us for the first little bit. But yeah.
All right. Well, let's go ahead and, well, first I do want to acknowledge, I do like that they record the lessons. My Coding Bootcamp did that as well. And it's incredibly important to just remember, like, you're not a machine. You are going to miss a day or two, and if they have kind of a backup plan so you don't fall behind, hopefully, like, most Coding Bootcamp should have thought of that. And that's really cool that you also get to look at other people's lectures, especially if you have a favorite. That's really helpful and you mentioned, Caitlin, something really important, and I really depend on this myself. Sometimes, like, the way someone teaches something, it doesn't connect with me, and sometimes you just gotta listen to it for like 5 times from 5 different people before you find that one person. It's like that light bulb goes off. So that's awesome.
Like one thing that they say, and it like changes your whole perspective on everything, and I feel like that happened a lot in bootcamp for me.
That's good. It's a good lesson to learn. So how well do you feel like you were prepared for an actual developer position when you graduated?
I mean, for me, when I first hopped onto the job, like, I was super excited. I didn't really know what to expect. There was a couple of mentors that I was going to mention earlier too, that have been developers for like 20, I think the one guy, his name was Jeremy, and he was been a developer for about 20 years or something like that. I can see Daniel smiling. He knows Jeremy. Jeremy was he's a pretty intense guy, but he was telling you kind of what was going on. He's like, bootcamp's it's not going to teach you everything. You're going to get out there and you're still going to be like, what's going on? But, it's definitely a good stepping stone to get you started. And, when I first got on the job, I was kind of flustered because I was like, okay, we have to build this front end from scratch. We have to take this old website, have all the functionality of it, and make a brand new website, or a brand new front end, from scratch, while we're revamping the back end. And at first I was like, there's so many things flying at me. I was like, I don't know what to do, because it was this very small company that I think there was 4 of us on the IT, like on the team, in total. And after about a month, it kind of just became a routine. It's like, okay, we're working on this. And one of my coworkers was a graduate from Lighthouse as well. And that was his first position also. He graduated like a couple weeks before me. So it was pretty nice to have somebody there that was at the same level as me. So then it just became routine, and we'd be side by side, we'd be working together, and it felt almost like boot camp, where it's just, you're sitting there and it's like, I have a problem, I ask him, he comes over, and we help each other, and then vice versa.
All right.
Yeah, I think what Caitlin mentioned like a little bit earlier is that you get out of the boot camp what you put in. Definitely applies to how ready you feel for a job, and also I think your employer plays a bit of a role in that. Like when I graduated, I think the main skill I learned was how to Google. Like that's really it, just like how to Google what I need. And when I first started, for the first 3 weeks, I was mostly doing bug fixes and like relatively minor things like that that got me familiar with the code base. And I think that's probably the most daunting thing about any coding job, because you're rarely going to actually enter into like a new app and build it from scratch. It's not how the real world works, unfortunately. So you're going to have to be learning how to deal with existing code. So Lighthouse had a few projects, like the aforementioned Jungle one, that kind of prepared you for that. But I think what I felt prepared for was just knowing that like you just got to Google things. You got to sometimes put in like 5 hours Googling, and eventually you'll figure out the answer and you can ask someone for help. But overall, like I think when your employer eases you into what you have to do, and then like the training starts to click in, because 12 weeks, you just absorb. But it takes a while for it to kind of process. Like jQuery for me at first, like I didn't get it. And then all of a sudden, like while I was working, I'm like, oh, it makes perfect sense now. Like how could someone not get it, was sort of like how I was feeling about it. So it's just about like kind of easing into it is really the most important part. And I think Lighthouse helped you at least when dealing with legacy code.
Yeah, obviously I don't have a position quite yet, but from all of the interviews I've done, asking questions like what does a day-to-day look like, it sounds like Bootcamp has really prepared us for especially the work from home worlds right now too. So you have that like daily stand-up, which would kind of translate, I guess, to a lecture, and then also just working on things for the rest of the day and communicating with like teammates and trying to like figure problems out together remotely. So I think Bootcamp has prepared us for that atmosphere at least. And just learning to ask the right questions, which I think someone else brought up earlier too, and just learning what to Google and how to get to the answer that you find. I remember Bootcamp, I had like 70 tabs open, I feel like, at all points in time. So I definitely feel the Google search skill has improved.
Yeah, I definitely wasn't job ready afterwards, but I told you where I came from. Whereas I barely understood any JavaScript on entry. So, but what I can say about it is they brought me to a level that I wouldn't have gotten on my own, not without like, I don't know, years of just trying to self-taught. It really brought me to a new level very quickly. So I started applying for jobs immediately afterward, and I was getting no responses. But at the same time, of course, I was doing Udemy classes, just following projects and build, the projects I would do were quite repetitive. I would follow the same type of project just so I could understand the structure very well. And then I would make a project on my own based on those structure. And usually, it was the MERN structure, the MERN stack. So after I said, okay, I'm going to update my CV. So then I updated it, and then I started getting some traction coming back, some calls coming back afterwards. So I wasn't job ready after, but I don't blame them. I needed more time. There's only so much you can absorb and learn in 12 weeks from such a low exposure to coding. So, but I was very happy with the results.
Okay. So that gives me a better feel kind of for this whole interview. So I'm just going to say it. Anytime I interview Canadians, all of you are very nice. Like very nice compared to Americans. And I don't care about saying that. I feel like, so I interviewed people from Braintree as well. And I do feel like, because Americans, in my opinion, overall kind of are able to be more critical of certain things. And it's to me, it's just a different cultural thing, very much so. So I'm actually going to challenge you, and it wouldn't be my podcast if I didn't. So let's jump into, like, really think about this. What could Lighthouse Labs actually improve? Like all of your experiences, if you had to like rewrite their curriculum, if you had to restructure the way your day-to-day would go, what would you change?
I would probably make the curriculum a little bit more dynamic. One thing that they don't really prepare you, like they say they do those interviews, like they do coding interviews with you, but like they're not very realistic, I found. And like the mentors just like, they're like they don't expect you to do well because coding interviews are daunting regardless. And like no matter how well they prepare you, you're going to go into an actual room and be like just kind of freeze. But I do think they could add certain like elective periods. Maybe it would extend the time length of the boot camp. But when I say elective periods, I mean, like maybe you could either learn a new stack, whether it be like a new framework rather, I don't think, like maybe Vue or something else that's high in demand, or you could learn data structures, you could learn algorithms. Because I think forcing either of those on someone might not be the best. I think algorithms are not that useful, but they are something that's asked a lot in interviews, and that's where computer science grads have the advantage. But if you're mathematically inclined or just put in enough time, you'll be able to get those, and that'll be super helpful. So I think maybe adding in some more help in that, like maybe just give you more options and let you choose a little bit, I think would be quite nice.
I think I agree with the technical interviews. I think there were 3 or 4 technical interviews. I don't remember, and I just finished the boot camp, but I felt like there were a couple of the interviews that I did absolutely terrible at, but my feedback was wonderful. So it's definitely encouraging, but I do wish they had maybe been a little harsher in the interview scenarios to prepare me a little bit more. I think I feel a little bit more nervous in the real world now. I feel like it's almost a safety net they've created that I'm going to get a good score no matter what, no matter if I know the answer or not in my technical interview. So I think that's an area they could probably improve upon a little bit. Okay.
That ties back into us being Canadian, not being harsh enough, I guess.
So I actually have a question for you, Caitlin. I'm very critical of myself, like very critical, more than anyone else. And do you feel like feeling that you didn't do well in those interviews is you being too critical of yourself, or do you feel like they were cushioning the feedback?
Potentially both. I passed all my technical interviews. And there were definitely a couple times I feel like I definitely shouldn't have passed because there were a couple questions I did not know the answer to well enough to articulate it the first iteration. The mentors in those technical interviews, I felt like mine at least, if I didn't know the answer, we would have a conversation about it and I would eventually get to the answer that they were looking for versus me being able to actually explain whatever the question was in the moment. So it was a good kind of practice. But like I said, I don't necessarily feel like it emulated real life to the extent in which I feel like maybe it should have.
Okay.
Yeah, I guess one other thing I could add, this is specifically for the virtual boot camp because I never had the opportunity to do it in person. But when we were doing lectures, we did everything over Zoom. And like I had mentioned earlier, it was really, really hard to keep everyone engaged and also cater to the needs of everyone involved, right? Because, one, like they were mentioning earlier, one lecturer, somebody might just, it clicks with them, right? Like with Andy, you listen to his lectures, it's just there, he explains it, you can listen to everything, but then you get another lecture and you can't quite pick up or you're not following, and it's hard to kind of just be that one person being like, could you go over that again? Or could you do this again? And it's really hard to get to everyone. And it's actually so much, it was an issue kind of in my cohort that for the final project, a group of my classmates actually built a Zoom-like platform that was more catered for that kind of learning, where they would actually have like a video chat like this, but you'd also be able to raise your hand. You'd be able to type in the chat questions that only the instructor could see. So it was actually a really interesting project that they did because it actually made it so like it felt like you were in a classroom, even though you were sitting in front of your computer, because you could do everything else, right? So that's the one thing for me that I found difficult, was just being stuck online and having to kind of wait your turn to get, for the instructor to come around to you.
I wonder if it'd be a cool feature to like build that out and you have like the instructor and maybe even the mentor's pictures up, and then like you have an actual like classroom underneath it with like desks, and then when you would raise your hand and start talking, it would like highlight and just like light up just some color. Because I like this idea that you're talking about, like they try to make it feel more like a classroom. I wonder what those features would look like to make the perfect app that let you do that.
So the one thing that that they also added was so the instructor could go in and they could create questions. So they'd start talking about a topic, and they'd say, we're talking about this and what's this, and everybody could put in their answer in this, or there'd be like a little voting poll, and there'd be like a little chart saying like how many people understand it, how many people are quite unsure, how many people don't get it at all. So that way the instructor knows they should go more into depth in this in case more people didn't know it. It was actually a really, really interesting project. I don't know if they continued on with it. I'm hoping they did, because it would have been awesome. But it was a really, really, really cool project. And it would have, in my opinion, something like that was done really well and professionally would have made Bootcamp virtually a lot better, a lot more, what's the proper word? Involved, I guess, as a student.
I think to speak to that as well, to give them a little bit of credit. So the pandemic happened and the switch to online happened very, very quickly. So they had to kind of figure out, how are we going to implement this to, one, get the cohort that is currently in our bootcamp the best experience possible. But then they also rolled out that they could offer this to absolutely anyone, because there's no location, limitations based on physical locations anymore. So they had to like roll that out. So their recruitment like grew way more as well. So I think there's a lot of factors that went into this switchover. So I think they're just starting to get comfortable with what they want their classrooms to look like. So that potentially is a great like future for them to have. And hopefully they'll look into doing something like that.
Okay. All right. So Lee, what do you think they could improve?
I was thinking about that, and it's tough. It's not to be nice, but I'm having a hard time thinking about it. But one thing I would say is maybe how to attack coding challenges. And you got to keep in mind, it's been about a year since I was in the boot camp, so maybe they did go over it, and I don't remember. And I think I remember them going over big O notation and things like that. But I do coding challenges on Code Wars and stuff like that, just to keep me up to date. But I don't, aside from the mock interviews and doing whiteboarding, I don't remember a lot of information on how to attack a problem, like maybe some steps or and maybe that could have improved it, in my opinion. But like I said, it's been about a year since I've been there. Maybe they did, and I just don't remember. But to
kind of add on to that, we had the weekly test. So we had the Friday tests for the first boot camp. But then I felt like there wasn't a lot of follow-up on those tests. So it's kind of like, here's a 2-hour slot for you to be able, instead of a lecture this day, we're going to do a test. So complete that test, hit a certain percentage. But then there wasn't, at least from my cohort, there wasn't a lot of, let's review that test and go over what the ideal solution would have been, because obviously there's a million different ways to solve those problems, and you can definitely make code work in lots of different ways, but they didn't really tell us what the most optimized version of those test answers would have been.
To add to the tests, I do, like, you just reminded me of that. Something I felt while I was there was that the tests were easily just, the reason they were there was just to weed people out, kind of, just see who's struggling and who isn't. And like the questions themselves, difficulty is subjective, of course, but like there would be 2 maybe extra hard questions, like 2 bonus questions, but the rest of it was sort of just seemed like you should be able to tell how someone's doing by, like, tests are helpful, but it's not maybe the optimal way to spend that time for everyone in the cohort. It could be useful for the people who are struggling, but like for the people who aren't necessarily, who are going at pace or above, it kind of felt a little bit like Like it was a waste of 2 hours, so to speak. And like, cause they never followed up on it. Like you could use like inner for loops, you know, like you can do stuff like things that you shouldn't do normally when you code.
Like hard code things in pair if you like really needed to. So.
Yeah, exactly. So it's like, it's not, they could have, I think the test is an area they can improve greatly.
Yeah. They pretty much just give you a blank canvas. And I mean, if you wanted to write 50 lines of code to answer one of the questions, you probably could. And they wouldn't have batted an eye, really. Well,
like automated tests that check your
well, it's all RSpec. So like, I don't even think they look at the test, to be honest. as long as it passed the automated test, then it's yeah.
Man, all right, I was wrong. You guys are vicious. No, I'm just kidding. I think all of you are very nice. So I think you did a really good job of also being critical of the program. So what I want to do is I kind of just want to sum it up and feel like if I got a good feel for the program, and feel free to disagree at the end and, correct anything. So it feels like my initial concern is that they are teaching Ruby on Rails for a couple of reasons. You can always find benefits to this, and the idea that they are trying to teach you how to work with a legacy code, it doesn't necessarily mean that legacy code needs to exist with Ruby on Rails. It can exist in a more modern ecosystem or framework. But my concern is that, so one thing, I think Ruby is pretty clean, and I think it can give you, like I said, there's a lot of magic, quote unquote magic, that happens with all these commands, but it can give you kind of a, from what I understand, people learn a lot of good conventions when they're learning Ruby on Rails, and that can give you a really good foundation. There are coding boot camps that completely prepare you start to finish, and you are job ready at the end. And it feels like this coding boot camp gives you a good foundation. I'm wondering how, like, I would be very interested to hear, like, from other students, how much longer they had to kind of supplement what they were learning once they finally graduated. And, a few of you have, or a couple of you have, you've been looking for a position for a while, or you did, at least previously. And I think you're right. I think you're going to need to supplement when you come out of this coding boot camp. Now, that isn't necessarily a bad thing, because you get a lot of coding boot camps that promise you that you are going to like actually be hired as like a mid to senior level like software engineer, and you get all these and you're going to make over $100,000. And so it sounds like Lighthouse Labs doesn't really promise that. And it's trying to really focus on the foundation, which is really good. I would question, it doesn't sound like Ruby on Rails is very popular in Canada either. I would wonder if Lighthouse Labs would have more success with its students if it focused on Python on top of Django, or Node.js and JavaScript. It would be interesting for them to do like a beta test with a group of students and just see those outcomes and compare them. Now, to come up with a whole new curriculum is like, that might not be viable, obviously, for their business. So I think it's good feedback, and I think it's very truthful feedback when you say you might need to supplement a little bit once you do graduate. And it feels like, everyone's very nice in the program. I wonder how that feedback that you've provided those mentors is applied. I like to look at like the selection process of a mentor. I like that it sounded like they had like actual software engineering experience potentially, which is really good to bring in and provide that context. But when you pay a lot of money and you just have someone that kind of just like gives you the code or doesn't explain it, and you leave that call not understanding why, like, I just hope that they are taking that feedback seriously and they are training those mentors to continue to be better. And maybe that's all it is, So I feel like, and I'll finish this up and then let you pick this apart. Tell me I'm wrong. With data structures and algorithms, I think like that's a really hard thing to teach. Some coding boot camps skip over it. And a lot of students are like, they're lost when they graduate. They're like, well, I'm being tested on this stuff. Why didn't I learn it? And it feels like they're trying to give you mock interviews. It feels like they're trying to give you those algorithm-based tests. I like that they even mention big O notation. I wonder, like, a good test when students graduate, if they did a good job with this, is do they understand basic data structures? Do they, like, can they go through a linked list, stack, queue, potentially, maybe not like a graph, but like a tree, stuff like that. Do you fully understand that? Can you build it out? Can you build helper methods to be able to interact with it? Do you know the differences of like which data structure can I traverse faster through, which, has a lower footprint in the memory and stuff like that? I think those are very helpful things to know. And it's hard for a coding bootcamp to really instill that in you, and even good ones, you still need to practice that. But I'm hoping they at least taught those fundamentals, because that's really where you're going to start reinforcing, like, okay, well, why do I even care about this data structure? What do I apply it to? And when you can start thinking about real problems to apply it to, that's when you're like, oh, I can use this linked list for this. And I think once people find like a real purpose for this, like abstract testing, they can start reinforcing a lot of this and do much better in the interviews. So overall, it feels like all of you had good experiences, but those are the couple of things that I noticed. So does that feel accurate, or is there anything you'd like to add?
It feels pretty accurate. They definitely did. It's funny you actually bring up like the fundamentals in data structures, because one of the most difficult parts for me in Bootcamp was the tree traversal, like going through and getting that stuff done. And it just was very, very complicating. Like the rest of Bootcamp, it wasn't easy. There was a lot of work to do, but like React was one that just clicked with me. Like I had my entire week done in by Wednesday or Thursday, and it was just one of those languages. I got it, it clicked, whatever. But I struggled really hard with the Ruby and lots of the data structure. So it gave me time to actually really catch up with that. But I do agree where it's like it doesn't make you ready to apply it, but it gives you a good foundation to continue to grow so that you can apply it later on after you've gotten better at it.
Okay. Cool.
I think for the data structures part, I think it is a very important key aspect. I think because all these boot camps, what they promise you, or not promise, but I guess apparently from what you're saying, some do promise, which is already an indicator not to go to that boot camp. But in general, they sort of want you to find a job, and that's their success as well. If you find jobs, then people will be like, oh, this boot camp's reliable. It's just their business model. So I think maybe they did give you the weekend work, like for algorithms, but that's not really where they have much mentor support. I think the reason for that is that people entering these boot camps come from all sort of backgrounds. They're not like computer science graduates who, have 4 years to learn all the theory and, just only code in Java and stuff like that, which is in the end is like they don't know JavaScript, which is where that's why boot campers are learning it. But I think the issue they would have with data structure is just it's hard to get. Like it's not as simple. It clicks with some people, like Josh was saying, like with React, that clicks with some people. Algorithms are the same way. Sometimes you're just more mathematically inclined because that's what they are. That's where, whether you're traversing trees, recursion, all of that is all just math, right? And you don't need to know math to be a coder, but like it certainly helps. And a lot of people who entered the boot camps were engineers. So I think that was good, but a lot of people weren't. They came from marketing, from all sorts of different backgrounds. So I think they introduce you to it, but and I think the career services tries really hard to find you job interviews where they know that you're a bootcamp grad, so they know like not to test you too hard on that because it's not even super helpful in real life. So at least they introduce it, which is good. But I think if they put more emphasis on it, like force it on you, I think it might slow down the pace of the boot camp. That's what I would be concerned with. That's what I'm guessing they may be concerned with too.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm on the same page. I think, like I said earlier, I think boot camp is all like what you want to get out of it is what you're going to get out of it. And if you want to put the time and the work into really learning data structures and algorithms, you can do really, really well. Lighthouse tends to stick them into like weekend work. So even like big O notation was weekend work. Tree traversal was weekend work. And it is when we have the least amount of mentor support. So if you're not understanding something, it's a little harder to get the help that you're looking for. So I kind of do wish they did touch upon that for people who maybe didn't have a computer science background. But I think that the overall summary of the program was pretty accurate.
Okay, cool.
Sorry, go ahead, Lee.
Oh, no, I just want to say, because we're talking about Ruby, between Ruby and Python. And I think, about a year ago, Lighthouse had introduced also a data scientist course, something like that. So I think that's where, if you want to find Python, I think that's going to be more the place to look. And maybe that's why they can't really, I guess you can have it in 2 boot camps, but maybe they wanted more to keep it in that course rather than the full stack web development.
Okay. Yeah, I think that makes a lot of sense. So, what's that?
That was a good point.
Yeah, it is. And sometimes I've seen, because I've had a couple people kind of like just ask me about their curriculum, what they think, and some end up kind of mixing both just a little bit and finding a way to integrate that. And maybe that is an option in the future. I don't know. Maybe it's a bad option. Who knows? But it is possible for certain. So I think this is a good review. We're at the end of this. So let's go ahead and do our outros. Josh, if people wanted to reach out to you, where could they reach you?
They could find me on Facebook. I know if you see it on the screen there, that's my last name. You can try and pronounce it. Have fun. Most people never can.
Bottenheimer?
Oh, hey, Bottenheimer.
Good job.
Yeah. You can find me on Facebook, LinkedIn, GitHub. Anyway, my email is my first initial with my last name at gmail.com. So if anybody's interested or has any questions about Lighthouse and they just want to reach out to someone that's been there, feel free to contact me.
Sounds good. Thank you. How about you, Lee?
Okay, so pretty much LinkedIn, I think, would be the best place to find me under my name. I do also have a portfolio site, leecastellani.com. And I think GitHub under the same name, or it might be Not a Yogi. But I'm pretty sure I also have it on, I think that's my username, but I do have it under Lee Castellani as well.
Okay, sounds good. Daniel, how about you?
You can find me on LinkedIn, and if you're a small, medium American corporation and you're looking to automate your 401go for $9 a month, you could join 401go. So you can also find me there. I'd be happy to introduce. I don't know if it's okay to do a plug like that, but
I told you could. It's absolutely okay.
Okay. Yeah.
I mean, if we're talking about that, if there's anybody hiring.
Absolutely. I think every guest on my podcast deserves to do a plug. And I really do appreciate your time coming on and sharing, because I know it helps a lot of people. So, yeah. How about you, Caitlin?
LinkedIn's probably the best place to reach me as well. Obviously, I'm looking for a job right now, so I'm on LinkedIn a lot. So definitely somewhere I'm
All right. Sounds good. Well, thank you so much for sharing your stories. If you find this helpful, let me know in the comments, and I'm going to do my own plug. If you like the content, please feel free to subscribe on Patreon. I had like a brain fart there. Okay, so if you want to support what I do and the content I do and you like it, please consider subscribing on Patreon. A lot of these videos, they are released a little bit early on Patreon, and we are actually going to start doing a little bit more exclusive content on there. So that's my own plug. But everyone, thank you so much for coming on. I appreciate that. Stick around for a couple minutes. But thanks for sharing.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you.
Thanks.